والله يدعو إلى دار السلام ويهدي من يشاء إلى صراط مستقيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على عبده ورسوله المبعوث رحمة للعالمين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. The battle is about to be over, and the result was obvious. The year is the second year of Hijrah. The day is the 17th of Ramadan. 14 years exactly after the first revelation of the Quran. This is the Battle of Badr. Umayyah ibn Khalaf, just before he was killed, he was asking Abdurrahman ibn Auf, who's this great warrior who has the feather of an ostrich on his head? He told him, this is Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib, the Prophet's uncle. He said, that man did wonders in us. He killed so many of us. And that is why Hamza was on the hit list of the people of Quraysh. As we will hear, inshallah, as we go on to the Battle of Uhud, the number of people that the Qurayshis had in their mind to kill. Now, we have to understand that 300 men cannot beat 1,000 men alone. No matter how brave they were, still the quantity, the amount is far greater than the quality. So was it their bravery that won them the battle? Was it the luck? Well, in Islam we do not believe in luck. It's all preordained by Allah Azza wa Jal. The Prophet ﷺ spent the night praying to Allah to grant him victory. So he supplicated. And also, he took the means for winning. He organized the army. He gave them instructions what to do and what not to do. And also, he sought the support of Allah. Just before the battle took place, he took a handful of sand and small stones, and he threw it on the direction of the people, saying that your faces are destroyed and mutilated. May Allah make that happen today. Just as the war was taking place, Allah Azza wa Jal sent 1,000 of His angels. Among them was the archangel Gabriel. And they came and participated in the fight. And one would ask, this is strange. Why would angels participate? And why 1,000 of them? Wouldn't Gabriel suffice? Him alone could have won this battle, but the battle of tens of millions of soldiers. The answer would be, it's true. But Allah Azza wa Jal wanted to show the Muslims that they were not on their own. And Allah Azza wa Jal also wanted to show the angels that He is the one who grants the victory. So their participation was symbolic, because one strike of an angel could have annihilated the whole army. Their participation was there, it was symbolic, it was to comfort the Muslims. And that is why it was reported in different hadiths that the prisoners would say, this man did not capture me, he did not arrest me, it was a different man, I don't see him here, all in white. And the man from Al-Ansar said, says to the Prophet, Prophet of Allah, I caught him, I arrested him. And the Prophet says, do not talk. It was an angel from the third heaven coming to do so. And also another story where one of the Muslims was running after one of the mushrikeen, one of the polytheists, and then he heard a sound saying, Hayzoom, go forward. And Hayzoom is the name of a horse. And he didn't see anything. Who was saying this? And he heard the whip of a lash, the sound of a whip. And then all of a sudden the man in front of him fell on his face, all in green. So someone else killed him.
I heard also the angels, one of the miracles of the battle where some of the Sahabas reported that they just saw people necks just falling apart and just bodies just dropping.
It's true. Yeah, this is true. This took place. And what about the casualties? 70 of the prominent leaders of Quraysh died. And 70 were captured and were prisoners of war. The battle was soon over. And all the arrogance that Quraysh came with was fallen into pieces. And they had to flee the battlefield in defeat and shame. And they went back to Mecca. Now it was time to deal with the current situation. The Prophet ﷺ ordered those who died from the Muslims to be buried as they were. And in Islam, a martyr, a person who dies in the battlefield, in the cause of Allah Azza wa Jal, is not washed and is not wrapped in kafan. He's wrapped in his own clothes, as he is. And we do not pray the funeral prayer on him. He's just buried as he is. But we cannot say that he is a martyr. We say that he died at the cause of Allah. And Allah Azza wa Jal alone can determine if he is a martyr or not. Because if we say someone is a martyr, is a shaheed, this means that we are granting him paradise.
Yes.
It's a blank check of him that he is in paradise. And this is something no one can guarantee except Allah Azza wa Jal or the Prophet ﷺ, who is ordered and instructed by Allah.
What about groups that say that they are martyred for Islam and they are shaheed for Islam and these causes? Is that not? How do we justify this statement?
Well, this is a common mistake. And Umar ibn al-Khattab, as reported in Sahih al-Bukhari, said, do not say martyrs. Because if you say martyrs, this means you're saying that they're in Jannah. And Allah Azza wa Jal knows alone who's in Jannah. So they just say they died in the cause of Allah. And if they're martyr or not, this is something that only Allah knows. And it's a common... Yes?
It's a hope, isn't
it? Hope is different than labeling. So you can say, we hope and pray that he's a martyr. But you do not say he is a martyr. And so many times we hear in the news, especially in Arabic, and they say that 3 were killed by Israeli gunfire, and they were martyred. Well, you cannot say this, because we don't know if they're martyrs or not. And that is why the Prophet ﷺ, when he was approached by one of his companions, and he said, O Prophet of Allah, a person among us dies for bravery, so that people can say he's a brave warrior. And another one dies for glory and honor. And another one dies for the loots and the money and the bounty we get from the battlefield. So which one among them is a martyr? Look, it's a very critical question. So the Prophet answers, whomever dies in the cause of Allah. Whomever dies to make the word of Allah the highest. So the previous 3 are not at the cause of Allah, so they are not martyred. And when you see people die in the battlefield, they all die the same way. But their intention is way different. And this is why it's the difference between hypocrites and Muslims are with the intention, though the acts and the actions themselves are similar.
It could make sense for me to understand now that it's too hard for human being or for just creations, and end of the day we are just slaves to Allah, that we can tell about someone, so and so, his sins good forgiven, and he's in heavens now, or he's in paradise. Because I heard that, like, you know, some sorts of groups, or like in Christianity basically, I heard that they, like, some people, they have the ability, as they say, or that, as they claim, that they can give one paradise or can put another in a fire.
Yeah, this is not the case in Islam. No one can say a person is in paradise or is not. And that is why we mentioned this earlier. Uthman ibn Mad'un, the companion of the Prophet and amongst the very first to migrate to Medina, he had the lady that he was staying at her house, because you remember when the people of Mecca migrated to Medina, the Prophet ﷺ associated each member with his brother from Medina, from the Ansar, so they became brothers. So he stayed with this family, Uthman ibn Mad'un. When he died, as he was lying dead, the Prophet came ﷺ to visit and to mourn and to bury him. She said, I testify by Allah that Allah Azza wa Jal has honored you and that you have been forgiven. So the Prophet says, ﷺ, how do you know that? He objected. So she said, by Allah, I seek Allah's forgiveness. If Uthman is not forgiven, who is then? If Uthman ibn Mad'un, the companion, your loved one, the one who was so close to you, is not forgiven, who then? So the Prophet ﷺ corrected her by saying, I wish and I hope that he is in the clear, and that Allah Azza wa Jal has forgiven his sins and put him in paradise. But it's I myself, I don't know what Allah will do of me. This is a lesson for us not to be certain that Allah will forgive our sins, because if you're certain, then you can do whatever you want.
Okay, so Shaykh, what about the people which they use that sentence basically, which that Allah is the most forgiving and Allah is the most merciful, and they give themselves excuse to commit sins all the time, and they say, yeah, because end of the day Allah is going to forgive us.
Well, this hadith answers them, because the Prophet himself ﷺ says, I don't know what Allah is going to do with me. So if the Prophet ﷺ does not guarantee, he knows Allah Azza wa Jalla has forgiven his previous and coming sins. But at the same time, he is fearful, because we are the creations of the creatures of Allah. Allah created us, and we cannot judge Allah, we cannot question Allah. So we do our best and hope for the best. But this does not mean that we do not fear Allah to the extent that we balance our fear with our hope. I believe we have a short break. Stay tuned, and inshallah we will be right back.
So this is an open invitation for everybody to recognize God and enjoy His blessings in this life and His mercy in this life and in the hereafter as well. Allah, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. Each name has a meaning. Each name signifies a nature of Allah the Almighty which no one shares or